Labour analyst Terry Belnard. Terry, thank you so much for joining us. So let's just detail the chronology of this. Pravin Gordhan says a wage agreement has been reached. The unions say, no, it hasn't. There's a new offer on the table. We're taking it to our workers on Friday, but in good faith, we're getting everything back to normal in the meantime. Eskom has just come out with a statement saying that all parties have agreed the way forward. So this is quite a delicate process that we're dealing with here. Am I right? Is this at a delicate stage, Terry?
It's a very delicate stage, and I sometimes wish that politicians and someone like Pravin Gordhan should have known better than basically inflame the situation by making a statement about a deal being reached, which makes him look like the sort of honest broker and the man who did it, and then to go on, yes, there has been intimidation, etc., but we also have to understand this is an unprocedural strike. This is an essential service, and this is something that goes back more than 20 years, where there were arguments within the trade union movement that you cannot stop workers from going on strike because it is the only power they have. Therefore, with an essential service, you have to have special deals done on the maintenance of basic equipment. Say, for example, an ambulance service. They'll only deal with severe cases, etc., that sort of thing. They tried to set that up, and that's going back more than 20 years. Nothing ever happened. So when you have this sort of thing, the strike was not authorized. The strike was not called by the unions. This was a classic example of wildcat strike, and because there was a breakdown in the negotiations, the wage negotiations. What the Eskom people said is what Pravin Gordhan should have said in their statement. Basically, all that happened after talks yesterday and this morning, a deal was reached that they would come back to the table to discuss. And Eskom said, we'll put a new deal on the table, which we will talk about at the Central Bargaining Forum on Friday. Now, that's where we're at the moment. Yes, one cannot justify petrol bombing, etc., in any circumstances. But at the same time, one needs to look into that background, how much of this went on. Were there some irresponsible elements? Were there criminal elements in what? We don't know. But in a stage like this, in a delicate situation when we're facing this crisis of electricity and electrical power generation, the last thing we need is inflammation or flaming the situation, which is what I fear Pravin did. But at least there are now talks, and the unions have said to their members who on wildcat strike, unprocedurally and unpaid, saying, right, let's go back while we talk, and we start talking again on Friday.
All right, let's talk a little bit more about these essential services where you cannot go on strike because what you do is just too important to the country. Eskom, Numsa and NUM are saying that they have not in any way condoned any kind of strike action, be it peaceful or intimidatory, because it's simply not lawful. How then can they guarantee that things will get back to normal if they don't have a handle on these intimidatory tactics, if they don't know who's been intimidating workers, petrol bombing homes? I'm trying to understand, if you have no knowledge of any of these intimidation tactics officially, how can you guarantee things will be peaceful tomorrow?
Well, you can't, but the point is that what you do have is perhaps probably the majority of the workers there are union members either of NUM or Numsa. So what you do is you call in your shop stewards and you say, look, find out who these people are. Those who are responsible must be brought to justice, must be stopped, and in the meantime, make damn sure this doesn't happen again. There's a breakdown, obviously, in communication within the unions, but this again goes back to this business of it being an unprocedural strike because it's an essential service. There needs to be, and they should have had something in place for decades, an agreement on what workers do when they feel really angry, want to show some degree of leverage for their wages or conditions or whatever, and the only leverage they have is the strike. So you have to have a special deal. This is done in other countries where you have deals done on what sort of services have to be maintained within an essential service, and others which do not have to be, and they can be on strike.
I see. So within an Eskom, you might have some people who can go out on strike to show their unhappiness, but basic essentials will stay running. Is that what you're saying we don't have in place and we need?
Well, for example, especially with Eskom at this stage, those who are doing essential maintenance would not ever be allowed to go on strike by the unions or anyone else. But you might have someone who brings the coffee to the managers and whatnot. Of course, they'd be on strike. And someone who does non-essential work within Eskom, and there'd be quite a few of them, they could be on strike. It makes life difficult for others in Eskom, but it doesn't mean that you have a breakdown of the essential services. And in this case, I believe maintenance is the vital element.
Terry, I want to get a sense from you. I mean, you look at labour issues, you understand the frustration of people working and feeling they're not being heard and they're not being properly looked after. Speaking to the unions, they say there hasn't been a decent wage increase or a realistic wage increase for years for Eskom workers. We're also hearing that Eskom workers are under extreme pressure. It has been a very difficult time. I can only imagine how tough it must be. So they are trying to push for their workers. On the other hand, we know that Eskom is in so much debt, it's practically eye-watering. And it doesn't matter whose fault it is. At the end of the day, we've got to keep the lights on. Where is your sympathy? And I'm asking this because I think a lot of South Africans are going, I have no sympathy for anyone who engages a wildcat strike and it results in stage 6 load shedding. What is your view on the plight of the workers at Eskom and whether they have a justifiable cause here?
I think they have a justifiable cause in terms of wages. Eskom made a terrible mistake by saying that workers were highly paid. Well, not all workers in Eskom are highly paid. So we need to have, I think where we have a breakdown here is in communication. There should have been a major get-together, maybe brokered by government or whatever, with the workers, with everyone in Eskom, and said, look, this is the situation. This is how we want to go ahead. What do you think? And actually listen to the basic workforce, what they want, and explain to them exactly how serious the situation is. Don't forget, there's also a very great likelihood within that Eskom thing, because of what has happened over the past decade or so with the state capture and whatnot. There are people who have sabotaged. Definitely, there's been elements of sabotage, and that's been done internally. So it's a matter of, once again, proper communication, getting together, and the union and the unions in this case have a serious role to play, and they need not to be adversarial totally against management. In this instance, they need to get together and say, let's talk it through, let's look at it and see which is the best way forward for all of us, because if Eskom goes under, there's going to be a lot more than just Eskom workers losing their jobs.
Numsa, for example, though, is accusing the current management team of being part of the problem. They say state capture hasn't ended, contracts lack transparency, and they should all be fired. How can you have a good relationship between your unions and your management with those sorts of public statements?
That's one of the problems. There's been so much dirt thrown around and so many sort of acerbic comments from one to the other. It's ridiculous, but I think you need an honest broker. I mean, Pravin Gordhan could perhaps have done it before now, maybe he still can, to come in and say, look, let's sit down, let's stop all this nonsense, let's put it all behind us. But not just at a leadership level, not just management, top management and the union bureaucracy. You want to bring the workers in as well and say, right, what are your actual complaints? Take a day off. I mean, not close down Eskom, keep the maintenance going, but actually have the workers put forward their arguments, make them, publicize them, let everybody know what's going on. I don't know what's going on actually, because you get different stories and different people telling you different things. It's not the way it should be operated. There should be transparency, there should obviously be accountability. And if there are contracts that are not transparent, well, let's hear which they are and where they've gone and who's accountable for them.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for your insights this evening. Labour analyst Terry Bell there. All right, still